What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Talking to the Doll Benfica podcast. My name is Alfredo. I'm here with Cristiano Oliveira next to me. What's going on, Cristianinho?
Chilling, man. I had a rough weekend, almost had a heart attack, but I'm doing a lot better today.
And up in Canada, Dave de Oliveira, which does such a great job with us for stats every week. What's going on, Mr. Dave?
Nothing. Just another night. Let's do it.
The guy that's barely on camera is the guy wearing a Benfica shirt. The rest of us just like, that's so rude.
and Steve Santos. What's going on, Steve?
Another night, another podcast. Sometimes I'm a little bit jealous of Chris. He gets a little meguinha before the freaking podcast every day, and I'm over here in the cold by myself. That's nice.
I don't know what he just said.
Dude,
I get up, meguinha.
No, when you get, like the little arm around,
Oh,
meguinha.
Yeah.
I never heard that expression.
Oh. Well, now
Anyway,
that was the first time.
Here we are for this week's podcast. 274 is the episode you are about to listen to. On this week's podcast, we will look back at Benfica's game against Paços Ferreira this last weekend. We'll look ahead also to Benfica's return to Estádio da Luz this Saturday against Marítimo. We'll also look ahead to what March holds for Benfica. Again, do or dies, lots of finals, if you will, and we're also that's a lot of alsos. And we'll look to the last 10 games of the season for Benfica and compare them to what our opponents are going to be doing, just as a little game, if you will.
And this one time,
and also. Anyway, here we are. Let's turn our attention to the Paços Ferreira game. Get right into it. Benfica traveled to the Mata Real to play in the smallest regulation size pitch in the Liga NOS to face Paços de Ferreira. I'll give you the lineup. Varela was in goal. Almeida, Dias, Jardel, Grimaldo across the back. Face Pizzi, Zivkovic in the midfield triangle. Rafa on one side, Servi on the other, and Jonas, the lone striker. Here we are. Very tough first 30 minutes for Benfica. If you want to, if you wanted the truth, and if you watch the game, you'll agree with me. Limited spaces. Paços very aggressive on their pressure. Pressured high. Didn't really let Benfica get some of that game rhythm going. There's a lot of people criticizing that the left wing was very quiet for most of that first half. My feeling, Steve, and I don't know if that's what you saw, is that teams that are now recognizing that that's where Benfica is going through the majority of their attacking game, the majority of their transition game, and there's a concerted effort for teams to shut down, close up spaces to those three guys that more or less operate in that left side.
Yeah, it was like you said earlier, smallest pitch in the league. I think Paços did a very good job of just limiting space basically all over the pitch. I think when the ball did arrive on the left flank and it was the usual suspects, they knew how to deal with it. Didn't really vacate their positions in the center of the pitch to get sucked in to the Servi, to Grimaldo, etc. So when they're passing and moving didn't create the mismatches, it didn't really come forward for Benfica. But that's very typical of like I was saying before the podcast. It's a very typical of a away performance for us, where it seems like we're just never as good, never as incisive as we play at home. And you can put down the fact that it's a small pitch. You can put down the fact to the type of football that Paços were playing, but we're also missing that little bit of I don't know if determination is the right word, but that little bit of concentration, maybe it was just lacking. The first 35 minutes, especially going a goal down, was not pretty. But after that, we started to get chances. I mean, you see Andre Almeida pop up in the box for finishing chances, I think 2 or maybe even 3 times in the first half, which is also another thing that you could go back and seeing that the left side was having some difficulties. The right side was doing somewhat better. I mean, that's probably the best game that Rafa's had in a Benfica jersey, I'd have to say. Almeida with very interesting. I mean, the modern fullback is playing a lot more inside than he once was in the 90s, and especially even more so in the 80s. But the modern fullback now in these days is showing up a lot on the inside. And Almeida, if he had better technical ability with the types of positions that he's finding himself, he could be very, very useful, I guess is the best way to say it. But because he's always playing on the limits of what his technical ability could do.
Steve, I think the word you're looking for is productive. He's been useful. I mean, he's actually had a decent year. I think he'd be
he's had probably one of his better years.
Yes, he'd be more productive. He had chances in front of goal that he squandered. So I think productive is the word.
Sure.
Yeah. And look, if you're watching the game and the game live and the lighting on the field isn't the best, especially that far side, and the far side was the left side, and it was almost dark in that side. So I don't know if it was a metaphor for what's going on. But Cristiano, we give up a goal in the 9th minute. It was a mistake by Grimaldo.
Terrible turnover.
And we've kind of there's been some criticisms by some of us, and I think that you've been vocal about what Grimaldo has done this season. He hasn't been perhaps the guy that we've seen in past seasons. He's had some up and downs, and despite him putting a good string of games together without getting hurt, knock on wood, a mistake, and it cost us dearly. And against a team that's going to close themselves up in the back and on a small pitch, it was going to be a difficult task.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. But just before I answer that, though, to get back to one of Steve's points earlier, which is, I think that Passos made a concerted effort to lock down the right side, their right side, our left side. I think they purposely concentrated more on that side to get the guys that we've accustomed to, we've been accustomed to seeing over the last couple of weeks dominate games. And therefore, Benfica had no other choice but to switch the ball over to the other side. Rafa was a lot more involved. Zivkovic even went from the left side of the midfield to the right side of the midfield. You've seen him switching, fields a lot. Andre Almeida. But I think the one thing that we can't ignore here, right? And Steve hit on this, and this is why I went back to it. I don't want to hear this crap. And Steve, let me finish, right? Because you probably think I'm going to say something, but trust me, it comes back around. I don't want to hear this crap about, we're playing in the smallest field in Liga Nos, yada, yada. Because what Steve said, and he's absolutely correct, which was, this is what we've been accustomed to seeing on the road. Benfica is a totally different team. So this week was the smallest field in Portugal. Last week was something. There's always a freaking excuse. So to me, I don't want to use that. I don't want to hear that about the smallest field, because Benfica is just not the same team. And if you go back to last week when you asked me about this, this past weekend's game, my prediction was if we play this game at home 4-0, on the road 2-0, it was actually 3-1. It's still 2-1 by 2 goals. So I was right. No, I'm joking. But I think Benfica is a totally different team when they play on the road. And every time. I think not just the players, but us for sure. And the confidence level is nowhere near what it is.
You think it has to do with the confidence level?
I don't look at this point. I don't know what it is. It's got to be something.
Or you think
there's something there that's not right, because this team on the road is 10th place team. I know they squeeze out wins, yada, 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 but the way they play is not the team that we're accustomed to. And at home, they're blowing everybody away. They're the title challenger. That team that we all expected to sit there and at least the beginning of the season before we didn't get any signings, but we anticipated they would be there till the end. And that's the team we see at home. On the road, I mean, they're a shell of themselves, man. I mean, it's ugly.
But do you think it's confidence, or you think it's the lack of comfort? Perhaps in some adversity that you have to deal with because of not only the size of the pitch, but because I think that when teams play at home, and granted, always teams play Benfica hard regardless, but I think that teams seem to be a little bit more reserved when they come to Estádio Luz. At home, they play with a little bit more crowd behind them.
Look, I'm pretty sure the conditions of the field, the lighting, like you mentioned, the size, the dimensions, everything comes into play. I'm pretty sure that it affects it a little bit, right? But to say the comfort zone, right? With the exception of Ruben Diaz and Varela, every single one of those players on the field have played at Paços Ferreira before. This is not their first game there. These guys have all played in these smaller stadiums in Portugal. This is a weekly thing, a bi-weekly thing, I should say, with the exception of playing the games that started to lose. Every other game on the road, Braga, Porto, Guimarães, and Sparta take those games away. Every other game, the stadium, the circumstances, they're all the same thing. So I think there's got to be something else in there that I can't pinpoint right now, but there's something else in there that's just not clicking. I don't know what it is. Steve, maybe you have a thought on this. There's just something there. I don't want to call it the comfort zone. I think the other teams, obviously, they don't make it easier on Benfica, but they just don't have that same confidence on the road that I see from them at home.
I'm thinking it's a combination of all those factors, really. But to their defense in this match, the attitude, especially in the second half, was a lot better. I felt we were doing a lot better to really impose ourselves in the game. We were winning the ball back higher up the pitch. I found that in the first half, that guy, I believe he's Ruben Michael, I think he's Madeirense.
Yeah.
Like
Braga, Porto.
Yeah, he looked like a fantastic player in the first half with all the space that he was able to find, but in the second half didn't pan out the same way. And I have to say I'd like I never say die attitude of the second goal comes what 80th minute, 82nd minute,
79th, I think.
79th,
79th, or it was like either 78th minute or 79th, which makes it it is the minute ahead. Or 78th.
Yeah, the second goal. The second goal
It
comes
was
in
the
88.
88th.
Yeah.
it's that late. There you go.
Yeah, the
And
second goal comes
88.
88. The tying goal comes in the 71st minute by Jonas.
Sí, que-
Yeah.
Vamos pasar la cabeza.
88th minute, Jonas puts us ahead. But go ahead, Steve. I'll let you finish unless you finish.
that was what I enjoyed. I liked that the team really just rallied on and had belief that they were going to get the goal, and it came late, but it came. I thought the Jimenez switch was a tad on the early side, but we talked about this earlier, but the second striker would have freed up Jonas a little bit, but I don't know, man. I know Jimenez touches the ball in all three goals, but I don't have a lot of faith in this guy. I know he's coming off the bench and et cetera, but everything it just seems fluky when it comes from him. And hey, that's my opinion.
Yeah, the
I'm
guy
gonna
always
stick to it.
brings the hustle. He always brings the intensity, and a lot of times good things work out in his favor because the guy never gives up. He has that, like you mentioned, that never give up, never die attitude. But in this game, I thought he was bad. I thought he had a couple chances. He had the ball at his feet. He could have done a couple different things, and he shoots the ball. The one he gets, he's by himself. Basically, he could have gotten a lot closer to the goal. He shoots from top of the box straight at the goalie. His decision making was not very good in this game. And I mean, look, I'm right there with you. You could definitely criticize those things, but again, one thing I think I've always praised for him, I mean, you guys have heard me say this countless times, is the guy has that never give up attitude. And I think that's a positive. And in these games, Steve, when Benfica's having a rough time getting the ball into the opposition's box, you need a player like that, a guy that's going to put pressure, a guy that's going to stay up top. But the problem was that he was the one dropping back. And the commentator even mentioned in the broadcast that Rui Vitória was giving him instructions to tell him to stay up top and let Jonas be the guy coming back, but they had that switched around.
I think Jimenez tends to basically wander all over the pitch. Just in general, it doesn't matter who he's playing up front with. Good showdown. The goal is that pass from Seferovic. Jimenez never sees it, even if it's on the opposite side and it's a more natural right-footed pass. That never happens.
He looks to take a player on.
Look. First of all,
he took it, or he tries to shoot from there with some crazy shot or something stupid. And that pass from Seferovic is quite good.
Steve, before we get to that goal, roll it back to the first goal. When the cross comes in, he shanks it. Hits Jonas in the bunda, and Jonas is able to gather himself and tip it off the kick it, tippy toe, whatever the hell, Biqueira off the post, and then but he even shanked that one. Like I said, I think his problem is he's so anxious to do so much that he's all over the field, and then when he has the ball, he's got time, but he's so anxious that he just boom, he just because he's by himself inside the 6. He's got to put that on goal. He can't shank that like that. But look, he didn't have his best game. The important thing is that they were able to pull off the victory. But to answer your question, we just jumped the whole, head to the whole game.
I don't even remember what the
pretty
question
much
was.
Grimaldo, that was a terrible turnover.
Oh,
I'm glad you remember
the first half from the 88th minute going back to the 9th or 10th.
I was a little bit upset because this guy, he couldn't catch up. I mean, I understand the kid. I forget his name now. The
Very fast.
He's a very fast player.
Cheviet, I think.
Yeah, nobody was able to close up on him. He sure as hell wasn't even. He's trying to reach him and get a foul. And I thought that Grimaldo had the extra gear. And
I did too.
I thought he had.
He kind of falls down,
and he does. And he kind of like, you could tell the other kid Cheviet was a lot faster than him. He loses that horse race easily. But Grimaldo, just to me, man, has left a lot to be desired over the time.
Yeah.
I don't think he's anywhere near as good as people think he is. I think the potential was there. I think when he first arrived, he was tremendous. Then he started picking up injury after injury. Then he comes back and he has an okay game, a bad game, an okay game, a good game, a decent game. And I don't think he's ever hit that level.
Consistency.
Not just the consistency, but also the level that he had reached prior to getting his, picking up his first injuries at Benfica. And again, Steve and I were talking prior. He's not physical enough. Steve loves him. I don't dislike him, but I just think that when you hype up someone that bad, he's got to be good. That's how I am.
Well, I think he's got some credits in the bank from perhaps his first season last season. He's got some credits in the bank. And I'll be the first one to admit that this season he hasn't been the consistent player that he was last season. Taking away the injuries, of course, that he had last season, when he was able to put a good stretch of games. I mean, my man was hitting free kicks, good free kicks, was getting behind defenses. And not that he's not doing that, but it seems that he's making some silly mistakes that he didn't make before. And I think that's the one thing that I perhaps can point out to him.
See, the surprising thing here, if you asked me at the beginning of the season, who's going to have a better season, him on the left side or Almeida on the right side? And I was like, come on, it's not even close. Come on, you crazy? Are you even going to ask me that? But I think Almeida, yeah, he has some blunders. I mean, he had a chance in front of goal. He basically passes the ball to the goal. Like Steve said earlier, if he was a little bit better technically, his production will be higher than what we've seen before. But I think he's been very consistent all year long, unlike Grimaldo, for say. So, I mean, if you asked me at the beginning of the season, I would have been dead wrong on this one. I think Almeida's had a very good year for Benfica this season.
So Benfica finishes the half with a little bit of a flash of what they want to do. They want to bring the game to Passos. And the second half, Benfica comes out and they were just all over Passos. I don't recall Passos having a chance or coming close to Varela. I think maybe after the 90th minute, after Varela drops that ball.
It's a good thing because he wasn't going to catch it anyway.
After Varela drops that ball and then launches the counterattack for the skip by Jimenez and the Rafa for the third goal. But Benfica came out firing. I was a little bit surprised, and I think I commented this with you, Christian, over text, that Zivkovic was the one that was being substituted instead of Pizzi, which Pizzi
I was as well.
wasn't doing anything. But I understood the logic behind the Vitoria's move was that you want to keep a guy that's central. If you're going to push up another guy into the midfield, you want to put a guy that knows how to play more centrally than Zivkovic. That's what I thought the logic was, more of a truer center midfield. I don't know. You probably don't agree with that. You're grimacing over there, Steve.
No, I'm thinking you're absolutely right. I'm thinking it's also the way the game was playing out. We were having difficulty connecting on the left side, where Zivkovic is obviously one of the reasons why we connect so well, if not the main reason we connect so well on the left side. But that was shutting down. We found ourselves having difficulty really getting into the creative areas of the pitch, like where Jonas is, where you would expect Zivkovic to be after it's already played out wide and it comes back to him. But we're having difficulties playing there. And I think if we couldn't get ourselves in there, Zivkovic is probably less useful. And since we were forced to be playing outside of the zone a lot with Pizzi's, let's say, somewhat better long passes, although Zivkovic's are good, but maybe more accustomed to playing that type of role, more the switch from one side of the field to the other, more the more direct ball into Jonas. I'm thinking maybe that's one of the reasons why he stayed on the pitch. But for me, even then, that change was what, 57th minute, I think 59th. It was 59th minute. That was a bit early for me. It ended up working in the end, but I just didn't think that. I didn't think we didn't have a good game, but things weren't going so wrongly that it needed to be that harsh of a move, especially on a guy that has been really good for you, that you may bruise an ego. I don't know. Like, it really depends. You need to know these players well, but for me, it was a bit early to make that move.
I don't have a problem with the move being that early at all, Steve. I have a problem with the fact that it wasn't Pizzi that was subbed off, because you're 100% correct. The left side was dead, right? But you can't tell me that Pizzi was having a better game than Zivkovic at all. Pizzi was turnover prone. Pizzi wasn't doing much. So therefore, I would keep the guy that's having a better game on the field, guy that's more involved in play. But I understand. You want to tell me that, look, we went with a guy that's got more experience at playing that lone role in the middle of the strip. Fine. Okay, I'll buy that. But I don't want to. I'm not going to sit here and say because of the left side. No, that's got nothing to do with it. I think Zivkovic was having a better game, hands down. For me, I keep the guy that's having a better game. And now, on the move, again, the problem was the guy that came out. I have no problem with him making that move that early, because we didn't just need 1 goal, Steve. We needed 2 goals.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You have to go at it early. Look, and it worked out, and I'm glad. I'd rather make the move too soon than too late. That's the type of person I am. If you're going to risk, you're going to throw your horses up top and let them wander around. It's now. Benfica did not have the luxury, right, or the time to sit back and wait until the 64th, 65th minute when everybody accustomed. I mean, it was only 6 minutes earlier anyway, but that's normally when the first sub is made, 65th minute. Look, he didn't have the time to waste. He couldn't waste any more time, Steve. He had to go get it, because it wasn't just like, okay, we need 1 goal for the win. We need a goal for the tie, and then we need another one for the win. We don't have time to waste.
Yeah. So anyway, it worked out as Cristiano mentioned, and if you want to know how good Jonas's touch is, even when the ball is hit hard at him, it hits him in the ass, it ends up right at his feet. So if that's not good touch,
look, guys, Jonas was tremendous in the last 15 minutes of the game.
Yeah.
Prior to that, he had that one header inside the box, Steve. That was going wide. I know the kid Vieta headers it out. He missed a couple of these. It was going wide.
It looked like it was going wide. Yeah.
He missed a couple of chances that he normally does not miss.
Yeah.
He didn't see much of the ball. He didn't see much of the ball. The Passers were very diligent in making sure the ball did not reach that area of the pitch that Jonas likes to operate.
Yeah.
That's why I said, because we were playing so much outside of that creation zone, I think PT is a little bit more accustomed to playing outside of that box or that
that's
zone,
fair.
Yeah,
than Zivkovic is. I don't want to go on to another topic before we don't give a little mention to somebody who had a good game.
Hey, I'll get there.
You'll get there? Okay.
Yeah. I want 2 things.
What if you guys disagree on the player?
No,
I'm sure we know what it is.
Two things to finish up, and then we'll wrap up this game. One thing is Jonas, and one thing, and I meant to bring this up last week, and we got kind of sidetracked with time and so on and so forth. Jonas has been absolutely burning everything up, right? So from goals, Dave's got some stats. 30 goals in 35 games, 6 2-goal games, 1 hat trick, 5 penalties, 26 goals from inside the box, 4 goals from outside the box, 18 goals using right foot, 8 goals using left foot, 4 goals from the headers, so on and so forth. So it goes on and on and on. Here's the thing, right? So we know that obviously Jonas's goal for this season, and no pun intended there, is obviously to perform well enough that he gets a look by Tite, right? I'm saying that name correct, right, Tite?
Yeah, that's every Brazilian player.
But I understand. But for Jonas, a guy that has been looked at, was at one point part of the Copa America
multiple times,
but then it's kind of fallen out of place. I think that Jonas has to be thinking that if I am one of the best scorers in Europe, then I'm really making a case for himself. And obviously, we mentioned this. It's almost impossible to think that a player of whatever caliber, and I mean, when we talk about this, we talk about only something that's in the reach of the very great players, but that a player that is going to be able to have this type of quality throughout the season. So now that Jonas seems to be in a little bit of a slump, if you will, and you see some of the frustration he had in the last game, is he really thinking that this is probably not the best time to be in a slump, not only because I can't give my contribute to the team in this final stretch, but also because now I may be hurting my chances of getting into the World Cup.
Oh, absolutely. Because not just Brazil, but any coach now, any national team coach is looking at their players now in the final third, and it's the guys that are in form. Those are the guys, unless you're big name guys, right? And you're out of form, you're still going to get called up. But the guys on the fringes, right? Those guys, it's the ones that are in form that are going to get called up. The guys that are having because again, they have so much quality that they have so many guys to pick from. So they're going to pick the guys that are hitting on all cylinders towards the latter part of the season, here in the final third. And look, I understand. You might be right. That's a good point. You might be focusing a little bit more on that. It might be weighing on him. But look, I think this is a guy. He's been around the corner a couple of times, and it's a guy with tons of experience. And like you mentioned, he's been involved with the national team. He's been involved in La Liga. He's been involved in major competitions. I think to him, it's one of those things that's in the back of his mind. I think every single player, I don't care how old you are, every single player dreams of playing in the World Cup. And particularly if you're Brazilian, man, I mean, you're born with that in your mouth. Before you speak, you're saying World Cup, Copa, Copa, Copa. And I think every player wants to be there. So he's just like every other player. But I think he's going to handle it well. Yes, he's struggling. He's not the same, but it might be because he's gone through his injuries and he's never really taken the time off to rest. I mean, this is the guy scoring half of Benfica's goals. I mean, this guy's a machine.
I think more than half.
No,
Has to be more than half.
I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah. So I mean, is a possibility. We want to make sure that that he continues to have his production and his goal output that he's had up until this season, especially now entering the last 10 games of the season. Obviously, is the wrong time for Jonas to go down. The other topic and that I wanted before we close out this game, and as Steve wanted to give a mention, is Rafa. And of course, we have beaten up Rafa here tons and tons of times, and deservedly so, right? I think that the price tag that was on him was heavy. We thought that at one point the shirt weighed very, very heavy on him, and there was a lot of pressure not only to be wearing that shirt, but also to fulfill the price tag that Benfica played for you. But now, Steve, we see a guy finally getting a run of games in a position where he's comfortable in, and now we finally saw him. Do you think this is a flash in the pan, or do you think this guy is now gathering some speed? And we're talking about Rafa, of course.
I think he's gathering some speed. Chris used anxious for Jimenez just a while ago, and I think there was a certain type of anxiety to Rafa prior to this run of games, where he probably always felt that every match that the little bit of opportunity that he got, he had to show something. He had to be that extra bit special, and he time and time again proved to not be that extra bit special. But now, given the fact that Salviu's down with injury, and he knows that basically he's first choice with Salviu out, he's probably relieved himself of a little bit of that pressure or anxiety, because he knows he's going to play the next match, bar an injury or a suspension or something absurd like that. So he's playing more naturally, a little bit more with less thinking in each moment, more playing with the strengths that he knows he has, more at ease. And I think this game was the first real display where you see the Rafa that could have been, or that could be, hopefully, 1v1 ability that's of one of the better players on the squad. 1v1 for sure. I mean, he killed the left back at that team that right now, Quinones, I think it was. I think he's actually was related to Porto at one point in time, but he destroyed him over and over again. His incorporation with a player that, like we just said earlier, is not as technical as Grimaldo, but he was still able to play off of and play with Andre Almeida over and over again down the right-hand side. As the game started to break up a little bit more, as Passos probably didn't have the same fitness levels or intensity levels that they had in the first half, the more the game broke up, the more Rafa showed up, because he was able to find space and to have more of those 1v1 battles. I think that he's definitely on the up. The only thing is, when Salvio comes back, where is that going to put Rafa again? And I'm not saying that Salvio coming back is a bad thing for the team or anything along those lines. Like I said, this has been one of Salvio's better years. But where does Salvio coming back put Rafa? Does that put him directly back on the bench? Is Salvio going to have to work for his spot? Is Salvio breathing down Rafa's neck going to bring back that anxiety and that extra pressure that we spoke of before? We don't know. But as of right now, I think Rafa is finally showing us what we all, well, not all, because I know Chris was a guy that had a few more doubts than I did anyway. But Rafa's showing us that he's a player, and I don't tend to like to talk about Luis Freitas Lobo much, but he was saying that this finally you see that Rafa isn't only a player for big spaces and counterattacks, and he showed that as well. He had the intricate touches to bring in Almeida. He had a couple good passes, although one thing that I have to keep an eye out on, and I'm kind of worried, he tries to make lateral passes or slightly diagonal passes when he's the last man back off of corner kicks, because it's him and Grimaldo because they're short end up being the last two guys. And one day, because of him playing them slightly blind and being over ambitious, I'm scared that he's going to cough up a bad counterattack. It's come close a couple times since he's come back to the squad, and I do not want to see it happen, especially against somebody like a Porto or a Sporting, who is less likely to forgive you in these types of situations.
Christina, you've been very critical. We've all been critical of Rafa. What are your thoughts on
my
this?
thoughts are simple. He had a tremendous game this week. To me, my player of the match, and I mentioned that on Twitter. I have no problems calling it out when calling a spade a spade. But I mean, let's be realistic here, guys. I mean, to say that this guy's turned the season around, I think it's a little bit premature. Number one. Number two, we have a year and a half of film on this guy where the guy was not good. So excuse me for calling him out on being, on not playing well. As far as that said, look, you had a great game. Hopefully with more playing time, the more comfortable he gets. But again, I think thinking back as Steve was talking, I was thinking, we brought this whole thing up last year, guys, here on the podcast, and Rafa was one of the players. While I'm pretty sure I was killing him and criticizing him. And one thing we said then, if you guys recall, was Benfica at the time had like 6 Carrillo. They had a bunch of guys. They had like 6 options, 6 players for 2 positions. And it seemed like one guy would play 40 minutes, 55 minutes, get subbed, and the next guy would play. And no one really got that level of that rhythm, that level of comfortability, consistency. None of them ever got that in their game, and now it's only now that Rafa is playing on a consistent basis. Once Salvio goes down, that it seems that his game is picked up. Maybe the guy needs to play a lot. The problem is this, guys, and everyone listening that's going to sit there and point out that I'm killing him. I got a wide back. Bring it on, baby. That being said, the guy needs to play at this level every time. It's not one game here, one game there. This is Sport Lisboa and Benfica. Benfica does not have the luxury, right? Whether you cost 14 million, 16 million, 30 million. We see what Jimenez, our most expensive transfer in the history of our, glory club, right? The guy doesn't even start. Benfica doesn't have the luxury of sitting there and Ramiminhos at players and tell them, go and play, Rafa, play, get the wrinkles out of your game, get the rust out. We have confidence. I'm pretty sure behind the scenes they tell them they have confidence, but Benfica doesn't have that luxury. And when you have other options like a Salvio, and they went to the old Gonçalves at one time, João de Carvalho, and this one and that one. That's what happens when you have a plantel as strong as Benfica's in the Portuguese league. They can't just sit there and tell Rafa, go and play. We don't really care what you do.
No, you got to show your worth.
So he needs to keep this up. And he's finally he's turning it around once Salvio goes down because he's getting consistent minutes.
Yeah.
2 things. Is he going to continue getting those consistent minutes when Rafa comes back? And then 2, most important, is he going to be able to keep up this play, this level of play? That's it. Look, as long as you do well, I'm going to love you. I'm gonna love you,
Yeah.
but when you're not doing well, I'm gonna point out the facts.
Yeah, that's the thing. Look, it's very just one thing to finish it up. It's encouraging to see him having good games.
Absolutely.
Now, can you keep it up? Now, that's how you're going to get the fans to like you and Cristiano to love you. So
That's most important. The last one.
3-1 for Benfica. I think that the outpouring of emotions, not only by the team and being able to turn this game around in a 2-1 and the bench, I think it says a lot about the state of union by the team. And I think that the team is very well synced and they have their eyes on the prize. They know where they need to get. They know how important these games are, especially the ones outside of the Stade de Luge. They know that these points, they have to fight tooth and nail to get these points. And look, it was a very tough one, losing 1-0 all the way up to the 70th minute, and then finally turning around in the 88th minute. Left it close, but nonetheless, 3 points.
Look, don't get this wrong. I'd much rather be the team with the 5-point lead here with 10 games to go. But the one thing is for sure, guys, it's fun, right? To see Benfica with that attitude that never get la garra. We seen it last year. We see it again this year. Every year, 2 years ago when Benfica won the game, Arrastas, right? This team, it's fun to watch. These guys want these campeonatos so bad, want these titles, and want to win it for us, the fans, and for themselves so bad. And it's tremendous to see the attitude that the players have here towards, the final third of the season, year after year, man. And I'm proud of these guys, man. They never give up. And we don't need to go into the 99th minute to get a winner or, some BS, whatever. You know what I mean? It's just this week, after so much crap that went on in the Portuguese league over the past week, a lot of people, the haters, like, oh, don't worry about it. This week, Benfica will get helped out. And my favorite part about this game this week was there's really no favors. I mean, Benfica won this game fairly, limpinho, and just keep it up, boys.
Yeah.
I mean, if
you're starting to see a witch hunt similar to what you saw against Renato Sanchez, now against Ruben Dias. Forget that. Forget all that noise. Forget about that. We're not turning our attention. We're not turning our attention to Maritim. Comes up this Saturday, 6:15 local at Stade de Luge. Maritim is currently 7th, 33 points out of 9 wins, 6 ties, 9 losses. Away, 2 wins, 3 ties, 7 losses. So they haven't won a lot of games away from the Stade dos Barreiros in the Madeira Island. They're tied for second worst attack when it comes to away games, with only 8 goals scored the whole season.
good thing for them, they're seeing Varela this weekend.
Yeah. Hey, let's not jinx ourselves. 2 wins from the last 10 games, and in the first round, 1-1. Last 10 between the two teams, 8 wins for Benfica, 1 draw, 1 loss. Last 5 at Stade de Luge, 5 wins for Benfica, and as I mentioned, 1-1 in the first round with a goal from Jonas. So an important game nonetheless, but Cristiano, as you mentioned, when Benfica plays the Stade de Luge, there's a whole different Benfica team that shows up.
Em casa, tem a obrigação de ganharem. Esta equipa com o segundo pior recorde fora de casa. That says it all. 3-0 written all over it. Benfica should win this game. They've got 1 win, and I was looking this up. As you can see, I was doing my homework, and then Dave beat me to the punch. They got 1 win in their last 10 Liga Nós games. Benfica, absolutely. There is no excuses, no ands, ifs, or buts. They have to win this game. Hopefully, we'll see Jonas back on the scoreline. See Jonas get his confidence back up. We get to see everyone else playing well. But this is a game Benfica has to win. Again, repeat. Each week, when they play on the road, I say the same thing. When they play at home, I say the same thing. So just use what I said last week.
Yeah. So now we Steve, I don't know if you want to add much to that Maritim game, but all these games we need to win. And I think that's it. When you face a team that has won 1 game the last 10 league games, you got your work cut out for you, but you also know that you have to win it.
Absolutely. At this point, we just got to keep doing our job and hope, like I said, I think last week, we got to hope someone does us a favor on Porto. So,
yeah. So now,
Porto Sporting do play Friday.
Yeah.
So that could be the favor you're looking for.
And that's
but
what
then again, they're the best player, dummy, taking off shirt because he has to send a message.
I knew that was going to come up at some point.
Another conversation for that.
Yeah. Let's get into that now. The month of March, what it holds for Benfica. We got Maritim now. Then we got Desportivo das Aves at Desportivo das Aves. I'm sorry. Aves at home, is it? I think it's Aves at home. Aves at home. So 2 straight home games for Benfica. Then we go to Feirense and we host Guimarães to finish off the month of March. Heading into the last 10 games, I'll give you a quick comparison of what Benfica was doing between this season and the 2016-2017 season through 24 games. This season, second place. Last season, first place. This season, 59 points. Last season, 60 points. 62 goals scored this season. 52 goals scored last season. 16 goals against, 13 goals against in the 2016-2017 season, and one defeat this season, 3 defeats. We already had 3 defeats at this point last season. So, I mean, the one thing that we could say is that our opponents, and namely Porto, has been a lot better this year than they were last year. At this point, we're kind of running away with this thing. Not running away, but we're in comfortable first place, if I recall correctly.
Last year?
Yeah.
No.
Did it go down to the wire?
Last year.
It went to like the last 4 games. Porto tripped up against Feirense, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah.
and then Benfica was able to take off from there. Right, Steve?
I'm pretty sure that's what happened.
Yeah, something like that.
We're
right there.
The biggest difference from the previous seasons to this season is the consistency that Porto is playing at compared to what they've done in the past. Sporting, again, were consistent up until I believe it was January the year before. And Porto, I think, was up until February, and they started to drop points, if I remember right.
March.
Was it March? We're still March is around the corner. So.
Guys, remember we went.
No, Porto came to the Luz.
That's what I was saying. Went to the Luz, and it was a 2-point game.
And they were in touching distance, and they decided to go for the tie.
It was 2 points. So I mean, it was even I said March. It was into April. They were there until I believe like 3-4 games until I think they tripped up. I think it was Feirense. They tripped up, and then Benfica was able to take off from there, and they never relinquished that lead.
So I'll run through the last 10 games for all 3 teams, and I hope not to bore you, but I think it's an exercise. So, but Benfica plays Marítimo, Porto and Sporting play each other. Right after Porto and Sporting play each other, they're going to have to play in Europe. Porto play the second leg against Liverpool, which is probably done and dusted. I don't believe that Sergio Conceição is going to put out their main guys and risk injury. Sporting has it plays Pletzen in the first leg. Then the next,
that's the player Benfica bought Krian from, by the way.
Is it?
Yeah.
And then the next one, Benfica will play Aves at home. Porto will have a very tough game. If Paços Ferreira plays anything like they played Benfica, Porto will go into the Mata Real and play Paços Ferreira, and Sporting will go to Chaves, another tough game for Sporting. Following that, Sporting will play their second leg of the Europa League against Pletzen. And it to me, I think that at this point, if Sporting decides that, you know, if they lose this game against Porto and they're 8 points, I think they're going to invest a little bit more on the Europa League. You don't think?
Here's the thing. Well, you look, they might invest on the Europa League anyway because JJ puts a lot more merit in that than other guys do. But that being said, remember, top 2 teams make the Champions League. Sporting doesn't have the luxury of just sitting back and hopefully we'll win the Europa League. There's still some big sharks in that competition. Number one, there's no guarantees you're going to win that. They have to fight for that second spot. Yeah.
So following that, Benfica will go to Feirense, Porto will host Boa Vista, and Sporting will host Rio Ave. So another difficult game there for Sporting. I don't know about Boa Vista playing at the Dragão. I mean,
stop with the difficulty. We thought it was going to be a difficult game for Porto, and they won 5-0 in Porto. So stop with the difficulty.
Guimarães, on paper at least. Guimarães, then Benfica will host Guimarães. Porto will come down and play Belenenses, and Sporting will be at Braga. So another interesting round there. After that, Benfica will travel to Setúbal. Porto will host Aves, and Sporting will host Paços Ferreira. And then following that, that's when Benfica plays Porto on April 15th. And Sporting will be at Belenenses. But in between the Braga and the Paços Ferreira game, Sporting goes through. They will have another round of the Europa League that they will have to play
if they advance.
And then following that, Benfica's at Estoril. Porto comes down to Setúbal, and Sporting hosts Boa Vista.
Porto-
No,
does-
Porto.
There's
No, I'm
a
sorry.
there's a game in between there. But
You're right.
Sporting
The Portuguese Cup. So following the Porto Benfica, the Benfica Porto fixture, there's a Portuguese Cup game. The second leg of the semifinal between Porto and Sporting, which Porto
I
leads.
should have done my homework here, but does Porto is it me or does it seem like Porto plays the team Benfica plays? They play them the following week.
It's almost like that.
Okay.
It's almost like that. So following the Portuguese Cup, Benfica is at Estoril, Porto will host Setúbal, and Sporting will host Boa Vista. Then Benfica will host Tondela. Porto will travel to Marítimo, usually a very complicated game for Porto in the Madeira Island. And Sporting will travel to Portimonense. And then the penultimate round, Benfica will be at Sporting. Porto will host Feirense. And then the very last round, Benfica at home versus Moreirense, Porto at Guimarães. And even though Guimarães hasn't been doing all that well, and Sporting will be at Marítimo for the last game of the season. So I think when you look at this schedule, on paper at least, because as Cristiano mentioned,
Shh, don't jinx it. Be quiet.
on
Change
paper,
subjects.
Benfica has out of the 10 games, Benfica has 6 home games.
Okay.
And look, I think that when you look at these games, yeah, Benfica still has to play Porto and Sporting, but there's some tough games in there for all 3 teams, I would say. So as this develops, we'll keep an eye on this, and you know it's going to go down to the wire. I really see this going down to the wire. I think that if Porto beats Sporting, though, I think that Sporting is completely out of contention for the championship.
No, they'll be out of contention for the championship, but I don't think they'll just give up because they still have to. They'll still have to, at least try to stay top 2 in order to get themselves a place in the Champions League. And then, even if they go on and lose every single game from now until March 5th, right, or March 6th, whatever it is, and Benfica's right there in the title race. I mean, come on, those guys will be hyped up to knock Benfica off the tracks, man. So,
yeah. Here's
they hate.
Let's get into some Twitter questions. Cristiano put out through the Twitter to for people to ask us some questions. So we are. I apologize to Francisco Marcelin for not doing the questions last week. I know that our interaction with our fans is very important. I'll start one with from Paul Sergio, your boy Hodge. Do you think this 11 is the best 11 we can put on the pitch the rest of the way? Steve-O.
Just give me a quick second to think through who's missing. Yeah, I would have to say yes. Salvio versus Rafa is the only question mark for me. Salvio gives you goals that Rafa does. He took his this weekend, but he took his well this weekend. But for the most part, that's one of his weaknesses is his finishing. So that's a tough one. But aside from that, I think this is the best 11 we can put out. Yes.
Yeah.
I agree on Salvio. I'm just not sure about the goalkeeper.
Oh, well, who are you going to put?
Might be a better option at this point.
Jesus. Palops. Just remember, Palops. Francisco Marcelino, what are the best 3 Benfica players this season so far? I think there's for me there's players at different stages of the season, right? So you got to put Jonas in there without a doubt. We have to put Krovinovic in there because he's part of the turnaround, right? And I think that there's got to be one other guy that's for me is Servi.
For me, it's Andre Almeida, the third guy.
There you go.
I was gonna think.
Other than that, I think you got it because I think Almeida's just been so consistently good enough. Basically, his whole career at Benfica, but specifically this year, he's been probably above his regular average.
I was gonna think of a quick joke here, but I don't know any players on the Benfica futsal team. So, but yeah, John.
I don't know where you were going with that.
Yeah, and I was trying to put the joke together, but since I don't know names, I couldn't put it together. Jonas. Almeida is definitely in the conversation. I think there's a handful of guys that are in a conversation. I think a guy that gets overlooked is someone like Ruben Diaz. I think he's been really good. I think he shocked me, and I'm pretty sure there's a lot more, Benfica's out there that are surprised. But I think he has to be in a conversation. Servi's in a conversation. Krovinovic, I mean, it was what, a 2.5 month sample. Not saying he wasn't good, but can't give you credit for 2.5 months and call you player of the season.
No, not seed, but the best so far. I mean, he's definitely, for me, he's a focal point because of, he was part of.
I mean, I told you last week, I thought the team was playing better with Zivkovic in it, not taking anything away from Krovinovic. But I would say, look, the three guys, Almeida, Jonas, and then it's between Ruben Diaz and Salvi to a certain
What
extent.
about Varela? Is he in that conversation?
Yeah. He's gonna get that bidão de prata that they.
Here's a show for you. Given Rui Vitoria's reluctancy to play Zivkovic, if there isn't a Krovinovic if there isn't a way that you have to find a spot for Krovinovic because he was that good, this 4-3-3, Zivkovic would be riding pine.
Agreed, but was
No, I'm just saying. I'm not.
We touched on it last week. We
Yeah.
touched on it, and even then he went after Krovinovic gets hurt. He goes with Carvalho.
Yeah,
He still didn't get
I
right.
know
But so you're right. I thought you were saying something else, Steve.
No. I wasn't like taking away from your point. I was just. I found it quite. Krovinovic is the catalyst for me, and then he's got to get a mention. So.
Now he gets a mention, but I think if I had the final vote.
You choose
I just mentioned
better.
4 guys that I think
before him.
Not Zivkovic, Ruben Diaz, Almeida, Salvio, and Jonas. Those guys have been way more consistent throughout the year. That's what I'm saying.
Ruben Diaz is.
Yeah,
he's
needs to get a shout. If you're gonna give Krovinovic a shout, he's definitely got to get a mention.
I think that
He's
maybe.
I think Ruben Diaz right now is sitting Luizão and no one's saying a word about it because he's been so good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's having to pick three players is very difficult, especially with 10 games still to go, and some guys still could be making huge contributions. Here's another one from Francisco Marcelino. Looks like Severovic won't have much of a future at Benfica. Mitroglou is flopping at Olympique Marseille 2-2. By the way, in the summer, what kind of striker should we be looking for? And he says, I think a pacey guy like Gonçalo Guedes / Rodrigues will be the best complement for Jonas / Raul.
Could we keep Seferovic and get rid of Raul instead? For China, something. I would have to tend to agree. I think even a winger or a guy who could play on the wing that's very direct, that likes to get behind defenses, would be a good acquisition to the squad to play off of Jonas. Both of those guys, both Guedes and Rodrigo in their career have played similar stuff out on the wing and expected to get in behind players. I think that's a good show. Whether or not there's a player out there that fits this mold, I don't know.
You know who I'm impressed by?
I hear the Bernabeu is unhappy with Benzema. I mean,
I'm impressed.
Benzema and Jonas will want to do too much of the same.
If you want to look inside the Liga NOS, I'm impressed with is that the Brazilian guy from Portimonense.
Tabata?
Oh, Tabata.
No, the guy that plays the center forward. I forget what his name is. Look,
Fabricio, I think.
He's physical. He's fast. He looks to be technical.
What about the guy at Braga that was supposed to come to Benfica, but he chose Braga because he said he wasn't going to have an opportunity? He's got like 6 or 7 goals this year. Brazilian, I think he just got hurt. He's had a really good season for Braga. He said he was on his way to Benfica, but then once he realized that they had 3 other options ahead of him, that he chose Braga because he wanted to come to Europe and he wanted to play rather than sit on the bench. But I forget his name now. I'll look it up and we'll tweet about it. But he's another guy that's supposedly having a very good season in Portugal, and again, a striker.
Yeah.
I forget his name. I'll get it.
Here's Francisco Marcelino. He got the questions from last week. He just copy pasted them to this week. What do you guys think about André Almeida's evolution at Benfica, especially when attacking? And is he an all-around better right back than Nelson Smith? I don't know, man. It's stretching a little bit.
I think the player I'm talking about is Diego Souza, by the way, from Braga.
Could be. I think that it's a bit of a stretch. André Almeida doesn't do much wrong, but he's not spectacular either. And what we're gonna get with André Almeida every single week. I mean, as far as comparing him or saying that he's more rounded by Nelson Smith or like Nelson Smith, I think that's a tough one.
Tu gastaste uma das tuas perguntas nisto. Não brinques, pá.
I know what he's saying about well-rounded. Is I think that
I think Smith
is a better
evolved.
defender.
So yeah, I don't know about
I
that.
don't even know about that neither. Look,
I don't
Andre
know
Almeida's
about
having
that.
a great season at Benfica. Let's end
Yes.
it. I mean, why compare it to Nelson Smith? Let's just look. Almeida's having a fantastic year. A year, like I said earlier, that no one expected him to have. Let's just praise him on that. Let's not. I mean, come on.
Who do you think had the most impressive start at Benfica, Lindelof or Ruben Dias?
Impressive start.
That's who's that? Marcelino?
Yeah.
You rebounded, bro. You got right back on top with that question. That's a very good question.
Yep.
Because I think Lindelof had that hiccup in the Taça CTT. They didn't look too good, but then once he took off, and I think very similar. Very similar.
Look,
Difference here, real quick. Difference is that
Very
Smith
different.
was actually, Diaz actually scored a couple goals, and Lindelof wasn't really getting on the score sheet.
To me, here's the thing between those two guys. I think that Lindelof had a quieter arrival, if that makes sense. He was more of he became little by little. I think that Ruben Dias is being more assertive, and I think it has to do with a lot of his Benfiquismo, and it has to do with his personality also. Very strong character, a guy that's very determined, and Lindelof didn't have that personality, so he kind of flew a little bit under the radar, where he wasn't as visible, if that could be a thing as far as personality, than Ruben Dias. But I think that both of them had they had impressive starts. It's just the way that Ruben Dias comes across.
Look, Lindelof is, like you mentioned, a lot more quieter, but the guy playing the ball out the back, especially that first year, he was tremendous that year. I mean,
no, Lindelof's feet are
but Steve, I think it's a very good
class to Dias, but
I think it's a good comparison though, Steve.
Oh, for sure.
Because they both started off like this, so it's a good shout by him. Go ahead, Steve. No, go ahead.
But I tend to like Lindelof better because I like guys that have that ball playing ability. But Ruben Dias has been, for a kid that we all knew he was kind of on the outskirts of the team, but to basically be our best center back within 6 months is a good show. I mean that shows you the strength of character. That shows you all of the things that Alfredo just said. So
yeah. Here's another one from Francisco, and he's already said that he apologizes that he did copy paste from last week. Looking into the future, when everybody's fit, do you think it's possible that we see PT struggling to take the place from Krovinovic or Zivkovic in the midfield? That's a tough one, man. That's
crystal ball stuff
tough.
there.
Yeah, that's very tough.
Yeah, because you tend to think that PT starts to get a little bit complacent, and if Krovinovic is around and Zivkovic is around, he's not going to have that option to be complacent. So it might push him to play even better. So who knows? That it's definitely things of crystal ball.
Yeah, that's a tough one,
of the three guys, he's probably the least technically gifted.
Yeah, but he's probably the only one that has a photo album of Rui Vitoria doing something. So you never know. Look, they could. Rui Vitoria, as long as he's on the team, Rui Vitoria is going to try to find a spot for him. Worst comes to worst, they play Feja, Krovinovic in front of him, Pizzi on the right, and Zivkovic on the left. I mean, if they got to play all three,
yeah,
that's probably what he'll do. But he's got some dirt on Rui Vitoria, boy. Let me tell you.
Yeah. Here's another one. Now that we saw him playing in both positions, what do you guys feel is the best position for Zivkovic on the pitch? Winger or center mid?
Anywhere on the field.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm his coach and his technical ability, I find a way to put him anywhere, even if he's playing a left back.
Just get him on the field.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. Right now, I'm really liking the way he's combining with the other two guys of similar skill set. But I also think that he would be very effective cutting in from the right-hand side on his opposite foot.
Yeah,
playing into the middle. He's got a great eye for a pass. I mean, he'd be able to find runners coming off of the shoulders of fullbacks and center backs. I think he'd be good in that role as well. But hey, like you guys said before, a guy this good, you have to find a spot to play him.
Yeah, here's one from Face's doctor. With the news of Pele buyback, and this was also mentioned by Mr. Mello. Shout out to Mr. Mello out in Cali. What's up, Mr. Mello? With the news of Pele buyback is Pele good enough to replace Samaris on the bench? We don't have many sixes, so if we are to lose Samaris or God forbid Fesa, do we have a replacement in roster?
One thing's for sure, he's cheaper.
Yeah, I think that Pele has been solid for me for the past couple seasons. I think when he was at Bolnes, I rated him. Now at Rio Ave, I still rated him. I think that it would be a good get for Benfica, especially that it's a guy that was formed at Benfica that Benfica let go. I think in a sixth position, he's a very solid guy to fill in for Facer and to split some minutes or just fill in when he's hurt. I don't think that somebody is a natural six.
Yeah, I like Pele as well. He's actually surprised me with how well he distributes the ball from that first phase of construction for Juav. I just worry that, well, it's all a matter of preference. I really like the kids that's out at Estoril that I know Chris.
Pepe.
Yeah, Chris doesn't seem to like too much, but I like him. He's the type of defensive midfielder that I really like. Very technical, very head up, organizes the game, good pivot.
But he's not at the level of Pele yet. He needs maybe another season, Steve.
That's my whole worry. Do you stunt his growth by bringing Pele? That's where I was.
No, you send him out on loan again.
Send him on loan again.
Send him to Rio Ave. I mean, if Rio Ave sticks with that coach, it's a perfect coach for him because he's technical, can play the ball. Here's one from Tony Lima. So who do you blame if we don't win the Penta? I think it's a little too early to start that conversation, Tony. And here's another one for him also. In the next elections, if there's a proper candidate, do you vote Luis Felipe Vieira out?
Not me.
Yeah, I think that Luis Felipe Vieira has the body of work right now behind him that there shouldn't be too many people challenging him.
I'm open to everything. Let's just see if there is a candidate and what it is that he brings to the table. But again, my vote is open to anyone.
Yeah, here's Tony again. If Sporting do not get the points from Porto, is the Penta over? No, I mean.
It's never over until it's over.
We keep the five. We still keep the five, provided we can beat Maritim. And as I mentioned, as I ran down the games that have yet to be played, not easy for anyone on paper, at least. Who knows what's going on? I know that there's a Malit that's already making the rounds. So I mean, who knows? I mean, we've heard of all kinds of conspiracies. Mr. Mello, with reports of Yuri Ribeiro and Pele returning to Benfica this summer. I know it's a bit early, but how do you guys see them fitting into the team next season? Or will they find themselves loaned out again? I think Pele is out, is not ours, I don't believe.
No, we have to rebuy him. We sold him with an option to buy or something.
And apparently from what the media was saying in the winter window, I think that Grimaldo has as some kind of an agreement, or an agreement was made with Napoli. So I think for me, Yuri is ready. He can come in, let go Eliseo
to start. Oh, to let go of Eliseo.
No, to be in that
in contention for a starting role.
Right. If Grimaldo doesn't stay, I think that you have to consider Yuri. Even if Grimaldo stays, you got to consider Yuri Ribeiro, considering the season
I get it. To have him in place of Eliseo, I understand. As far as a starter right away, I'm not sure if he's going to get there. But I think this is premature as well. Still off season, a lot of moves to be made. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Here's one from your boy Hodge. Two things. First, this team without Fesa is in fourth.
Absolutely.
Must be top three. Second, now that Zivkovic has settled in, and what are your thoughts about Benfica signing Lucas Evangelista? I think it's a different player, right? Because Evangelista is more of an 8. Not so much of an interior, if I could recall correctly, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, he's
Okay.
a box guy.
Yeah.
I didn't see enough of Evangelista to say I definitely wanted him so he could stay where he is. The face of thing, I think we all messed that up and didn't think of him because yeah, he's standout, one of our best performers to date. So
Yeah. Anyway, that's all the questions that we have. Thank you for participating, Francisco Marcelino, and everybody else. Sorry we didn't. I know that you had a lot of questions, but I guess we owe it to you since we didn't answer the questions. That's all we have. Cristiano, you got anything to add?
Nothing useless to say.
Yep. So that's it. We'll see what happens this Friday. Also this weekend, obviously, Benfica needs to keep winning games if they want to have a chance to take over and win the Penta.
Worry about your duties, and
that's it.
Everything else will fall into place.
That's right. That's how it's been in the past couple of years. So things have fallen into place quite nicely. Steve Santos, always a pleasure talking to you. You can find Steve over in Twitter at Steve Santos6. Twitterless Dave. Thanks for your stats as always, man. You're an encyclopedia of stats. Thank you, man. At Cristiano Oliveira at 10CO10 is where you can find Cristiano on Twitter. BenficaPodcast.com, iTunes, Stitcher Radio, RSS feed for your pod aggregators. We're also on Google Play Music if you want to listen to that. And that's it. Thank you very much for everybody. Thank you to everyone for checking us out. PlanetBenfica.co.uk. If we always forget to mention those guys. That's it. At Benfica Podcast is where you can find us on Twitter. We're also on Facebook. If you search, we're there. And that's it. Thank you very much, everybody. Next week, we'll be back. We'll break down the Marito game, and we look ahead to the Aves game, also at Estádio Luz. Back-to-back Estádio Luz games. So for you guys that are privileged enough to go to Estádio Luz, enjoy. Big shout-out to all the projects involved, the independent Benfica projects involved. Anyway, see everybody. Always nice speaking to you guys. I'm trying to find the off button. Later.